Welcome to the Faculty Toolkit session on promotion and tenure. Thank you all very much for coming. This is one of our series that is offered through the Office of Faculty Affairs and Human Resources and the Office of Diversity and Development. The way the session is going to go today is I will give a brief outline of promotion and especially some new changes that have arisen in this cycle for the 2016-2017 promotion cycle. But then we're gonna skip to the panel of our CAPT members, and then the bulk of this should really be questions that you have about promotion, and then we will pass it to the experts. This presentation will be posted along with this podcast on the Faculty Affairs website. And if you ever have questions about promotions, please just send me an email. If I do not know it, I can certainly refer you to someone who does. So as we talk about promotion, this is not something that you should start thinking about when you're ready or when you think you are ready to go up for promotion. As soon as you have your faculty appointment, you really should know the guidelines and standards, know where those are, and know what you will be judged for. And if you're not clear, you need to talk to your chair, you need to talk to your colleagues, and you can certainly come and talk to me. You should also be building a relationship and finding mentors who can help you achieve these goals, who can connect you to possibilities and collaborative efforts, and then get you hooked in to teaching or to service, and can recommend you with professional organizations to make sure that you have the reputation of a regional or national expert. As things progress, your department, your colleagues are supposed to review you. So this is not a recommendation when you say, I am ready to go up for promotion. This is a review to tell you, are you on track to be promoted? For people on the tenure track, this is mandated at your third year and your sixth year. You should submit materials to your DCAP. They should write a review. You get a copy of this, and everyone has to actually sign that you got a copy. Your DCAP chair, your department chair, and yourself, and then we keep those in my office. For non-tenure track faculty, 6 years after your promotion to assistant or associate professors or your appointment to assistant or associate professor, you are also supposed to get a review by your department CAPT. Those reviews end when you've reached professor because there's no more promotion. You're good. You've made it. There is a lot of resources on the Faculty Affairs website. This is where we store the most up-to-date information. I'm not going to go through this. Just know that often I will send you here, so this is something that you can start out with. The promotion begins with obviously a discussion between you and your chair and your mentors, and you make the decision along with your chair to say, I'd like to go up for promotion. Your chair typically will nominate you and present this candidacy to you, to the department CAPT. I will say that if your chair does not nominate you and you wish to be considered for promotion, our bylaws require that you get an advocate. So you identify someone who is going to be at the department CAPT meeting, will speak for you. The chair is also there, but both the chair and the advocate leave the room when the vote is actually taken. If you have questions about that, just let me know. So new this year is that each candidate must submit a declaration of candidacy that tells me your current rank, I need contact information, and it also identifies what area you're going up for promotion. Is this because you want to go up and be considered for excellence in teaching if you're on the non-tenure track, for excellence in clinical service if you're on the non-tenure track, or for research for those who are on the non-tenure track, and also we'll touch base on the guidelines for the tenure track. Your department will then submit your entire packet that includes everything, and there is a checklist, into Faculty Affairs before May 27th. We, in Faculty Affairs, will send out letters for all your references. We will get those materials back, and in the fall, the CAPT meets about promotions. And again, there will be members that you can ask these questions for. After the CAPT meets, those are reviewed by the steering committee for equity. The dean makes her recommendation, and then we send these to the provost for review, and then recommendation to the board of trustees. Once those are sent in January, December and January, My office in the School of Medicine doesn't hear again until the decision is made. So throughout the spring, we're just waiting. If something happens, we ask you to update us if you got another grant or another publication. But again, those are all conversations that we update the candidates with. All right, so here are the standards for individuals on the tenure track. Promotion in the tenure track and the award of tenure require a high record of achievement, of excellence in research, contributions that indicate a high level of teaching effectiveness, and significant service contributions. You need all three. For promotions and standards on the non-tenure track, we recognize research, teaching, administrative service, and clinical service. And these require the candidate must present evidence of excellence in either teaching or clinical service and recognition of this excellence at a regional or national level, or research and recognition of the research program at a national level. So this is a really important distinction on the level of recognition that you're achieving. Something that we've gotten a couple questions about. So since 2006, we've allowed or recognized team science, but we didn't have a lot of guidance on what that looked like in a promotion packet. We've made a distinction between independent scientists, and this is what we are most familiar with. It is the PI on an R01. It's recognition that you are the major driver or the leader in this field of study. And then there are team scientists, and the greater portion of their research accomplishments, publications, and national reputation rests in their original, creative, indispensable, and unique contribution made to a group of other scientists or in changing series of groups and other scientists. You can be both, and we call that a hybrid. So if you're doing some work and some research as a PI, and then other work with a collaborative effort, and you're bringing unique contributions that no one else could, that is what the hybrid model would be. And then there are ways to indicate that in the packet. All right, this is how you document it. In your personal statement, you need to tell us whether or not you are an independent scientist, a team scientist, or both, which is that hybrid model. In your CV, you need to annotate all of those team science contributions. So if you're our third or fourth author, we may not recognize that you are playing that unique and indispensable role, so you need to put an asterisk and you need to tell us what that is. This applies not only to the funding, but the publications, presentations. We want to see what those team science elements are. And then when you are listing the references that we in the Office of Faculty Affairs will ask for, you need to indicate 2 of the 4 collaborators to write on behalf as team colleagues. So they are the leaders of those team science projects that you are working on. And then just keep in mind when you are identifying your other external referees who might be familiar with team science and will be able to speak about that. All right. Another thing is excellence in teaching. If you are on the non-tenure track and you choose excellence as the basis in teaching as the basis for your promotion, you must submit a teaching portfolio. This year, we included a limit of 25 pages. This does not include your teaching evaluations. Those are required for every candidate. But it does include a philosophy of teaching, a teaching inventory, a discussion of your teaching contributions, and what awards you have won. There are additional references and recommendations if you are working on this, and we also have a previous podcast and faculty toolkit on teaching portfolios. But these are wonderful. There's a great deal of information that you can do, and it is open to all candidates. It is just required for individuals on the non-tenure track who are getting promoted on the basis of teaching. All right, enough of me talking. I would like to invite the CAPT members up, and we're going to open it up for questions. I'll ask the members to maybe offer some recommendations or advice, if again, to candidates that are going up for promotion, things that they have seen while they sit on the CAPT, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So, and if you could introduce yourself and then maybe offer some recommendations or advice generically to all promotion candidates.
Okay, I'm Brian Cobb. I'm in the Department of Pathology and I'm associate professor, tenured. I am this year's one of two co-chairs of the School of Medicine CAPT. General advice. Document everything and actually explain things. Don't use too many acronyms. If you say that you went to a meeting that's of the NCFAW, tell me what that is, because I have no idea what that is, right? Tell me where things are. Tell me, the team science thing has actually come up more and more. So I want to reiterate that point. There's many points to emphasize here, but so every manuscript, every publication that you have that you're citing as evidence of your team science contributions should have a sentence or two below it explaining what the context of that team science contribution is. Every paper. Okay. Same goes with like grants and things like that. So make it easy. This is just like a grant review. Make it easy on the reviewers. Make it easy for us to understand what your contributions are, what your unique contributions are, and things will go smoothly.
I'm Pete Zimmerman. I'm in the Center for Global Health and Diseases. I've been on this committee for 2.5 years, and what Brian's advice he's just shared with you, I would reiterate. I think the other thing that I'd like to share with you is that, this group is interested in you and interested that you succeed through this process. We earnestly read all of the material that you give us. And so, you need to know that you have advocates on this committee, every single person. I think I can speak on behalf of everybody on the committee. But you also have to keep in mind that the people on this panel are also putting in grants to the NIH, writing papers, trying to manage labs, their own personal life, the fact that their plumbing just broke in their house and they're dealing with that as well. And so whereas we are definitely sincerely your advocates, if you hand us a bunch of disorganized stuff, you can just sort of start to imagine how much time we're going to put into it.
Hi, I'm Danny Manner. I'm an associate professor tenured in the Department of Nutrition at the School of Medicine. This is my first year of this 3-year cycle on the CAPT. I was 4 years ago for a 3-year term, and I chaired it one of those. Again, these are the basic advice that you've gotten from my two colleagues are what I wanted to say. The understanding that we have coming in to read your folders is that this is a great folder. This is how we approach it, right? There's nobody in the room that is trying to nitpick and look for things to trump you on, right? And so that said, again, it's like a grant panel. You kind of want it to be perfect. And it can be an annoyance, I know, for some of you, putting it together, right? Both for you and for the administrators, because we're not necessarily that good at doing this administrative stuff, right? But it's really important that you do that. We typically spend reviewers spend on the order of 4 hours on each of these, right? And there are 2 reviewers at least. So there's a lot of time and effort that goes into this. And if you make it harder, then it's harder for us, to be positive. I mean, so that's the advice. Maybe open it up for questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat the question just to make sure that we have it on the recording. So,
So I already warned Pete I was going to ask this, so he's had time to mull it over. So now we're defining people as hybrid, and this is new because now that you have this declaration form, you actually have to declare formally what you are. And so I would like the panel to explain more concretely, like some examples what a hybrid might look like compared to an independent scientist. Because I think honestly most people are probably hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
They're gone are the days of everyone, having 5 R01s and being first and last author on everything. I think a lot of people, and so how do you make that decision? and will you get faulted for declaring the wrong thing?
so the question was a little more information on what a hybrid scientist
Oh, you're looking at me? So formally, we actually haven't seen hybrids. So right. Well, but I can't. So my point is that I can't say what they look like because we haven't done this yet, right? But at least not formally.
So
No one's ever declared.
this past year, so part of the reason why we're doing the declaration of candidacy is because I asked you specifically, please let me know what you are. There was an assumption that it was obvious whether or not you were an independent scientist, a team scientist, or both. And that's not the case. And so we wanted to be very clear. We looked for it within the chair's nominating letter, within the DCAP's recommendation, and your personal statement, and also obviously within the packet when we send out letters. That's always very important to know which designation you are, because it modifies the letters whether we're asking your external referees for information specifically on your team science. And so a couple years ago, the vast majority of individuals were hybrids. They, I want to say, I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was one individual went up for promotion on team science, and 10 were hybrid. And so it was a designation of one or the other, and it really was looking at the CV to identify where it was annotated.
Okay. All right. So, from my point of view, I can answer this question better from a team science perspective because that's gotten a lot more attention in terms of discussion on how to handle this. And I would go back to kind of the opening thing that I said a minute ago as far as general advice, because this thing, it continues to evolve, because I think that we all are trying to figure out the answer to the question that you asked. So from the team scientist perspective, the trouble was when we first started defining this was that how do we objectively measure that? How do we know the difference between someone who got an authorship is a middle author on a paper that, we gave them a mouse or something and they did an experiment with it, and you really didn't contribute anything other than, here's a reagent or whatever, and you ended up getting on the paper, versus someone who is absolutely required for that paper to be, or that study to be completed, and to have a resulting manuscript and a publication out of it. And if you just have an author list of a particular publication, there's no way to tell that. And so what has evolved over the last few years, so I've been on the committee for 3 years and have another 3 years in front of me. What we started asking for is exactly what I was saying earlier, and that is for everything that is part of the argument, of your argument that you're a team scientist, needs to be explained. You have to explain this and spell it out to us, because there's no way for us to know one way or the other. So if you have a publication, start team scientist, and my unique contribution to this work was bleh. It doesn't have to be, a dissertation for every paper. Just, a sentence. Tell us what the key contribution, the unique contribution you made to that study was, so that we can then start to understand where you fit in and where the team science is actually coming out. Okay? And, in a hybrid, it's going to be, you're going to have a combination of things, right? You're going to have some of those will be team science and some of them won't. And so you'll be senior author on those papers or whatever. And it should be pretty obvious. The independent scientist and the senior author thing is easy to see. It's the team science part that's hard to define. And so if you define it for us, then we can evaluate it and make decisions based on that. You guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, regarding whether you get penalized for this in any form, and I think there's no way you will. Okay, the bottom line is that there are still these 3 metrics or measures of excellence, whether you're a team scientist, whether a hybrid, whether you're an individual PI, that you're being evaluated on, right? Which type of a PI you are is sort of how you get there, right, and what your role is in a team. But that doesn't make these criteria easier or harder to evaluate, right? You have to be excellent, right? Another thing that helps, in addition to what Brian has said, and in the previous cycle, we have actually gone back to a chair and asked, if you are a 3rd author, right, and feel that this is an important contribution and star it, it does help that the lead author supplies a statement. This is more an issue in clinical manuscript or works, right, where you can have 15 people and it's really hard for us to, it's impossible for us. Then if the lead author says, well, this has been a key instrumental person for coordinating the 3 clinical centers, I don't know what, right, then it really helps. And they're usually very happy to do that. So that's an easy fix.
Go ahead, Pete. I wanna add one.
And I don't think you're saying that. I mean, what it sort of emerging is we're being asked to provide an annotated bibliography on our CVs, and okay, let's accept that. Some of the things that, I mean, I've talked to some people about this is, you know, let's say that you had 50 publications in your publication record, and you provided this annotation for 18 of those manuscripts. Well, what does that mean for the other ones? You know, it begins to, you know, the question emerges in your head: should I provide information for the rest of these manuscripts? Well, it's your opportunity to say what you've done. So yeah, how about annotate the entire thing, make it crystal clear. Again, we're trying to, you know, to come up with something to help you clear this hurdle. Now, I don't think Danny's suggesting that for every one of your references that you need to have the PI give you that sort of seal of approval thing. I think at that point, you know, unless you're working for 50 different PIs, you know, you're probably working for a similar PI in most of your publications. Therefore, you know, logic begins to tell you, I definitely need to have that person write me a letter of support to accompany my tenure and promotion package.
Okay, good.
I will just step in and say, again, to annotate everything only if it's team science, though, because if you are a hybrid, and it wasn't necessarily unique, it was, you know, I participated, but it wasn't to the level of a team scientist, I would make that distinction. Sorry, and then-
I would just say one other thing. So I made the analogy of, you know, the CAPT is like a study section, with one very important difference. The study section, because I'm a standing member of study section too, study sections are looking for reasons to ding you. We're looking for reasons to promote you. It really is that way. And I've seen discussions go on in this committee where we're bending over backwards to find reasons to say yes. And that's really true. It's not that we're trying to find reasons to say no, it's the other way around.
I'm actually going to pass this microphone so you can.
Yeah, so for individual category, for research scientists, question about service and service contributions, and the contributions that you do, I guess, are the weighting things for university service versus sort of national level service. Like if you're on a standing member of an NIH study section or editorial board, things like that, versus, you know, the weights of that in consideration versus university level.
So my comments on that would depend on what the type of promotion that we're talking about. So if you're a non-tenure track versus tenure track, these things can be a little bit different. But, you know, I look at those things, and these guys can tell you how they look at them, but I look at these things in terms of as objective measures of the level of reputation that you have. So if you are a standing member of a study section, that tells me very clearly that you have a national reputation for the field that you work in, because you don't get asked to do that if you're not known for a particular area. And so I see that as going directly to evidence of your national reputation in your field. It's obviously counting for service, right? So that's really good, and those are very important, but I see that primarily in the context of your national level reputation. As far as local services, you know, I think that you want to score points in the sense that you want to be labeled a good citizen, right? You don't want to be doing only national level service and doing absolutely nothing at CASE or UH, because that gets people frustrated, because there are plenty of people that do both, and so I weighting one over the other, they're kind of saying different things about your package, and from my point of view, and these guys can maybe differ in how they review things, but for me, they say different things about you. The local stuff is, being a good citizen, putting in your time like many of us do. The national level service is service, but it also shows that you're nationally recognized for doing certain things, and I think that's really important.
Maybe some of those gray area things. You're a member of a large committee of your national academic organization. Well, if that's all it says, then we can't really comment any further on what do you just go to the breakfast meeting once a year? Or, on the other hand, are you driving a major part of the membership committee for your national organization? Again, it's an annotated bibliography, isn't it? So it's your opportunity. I won't say it's your job. It's your opportunity to make it clear on how we should state your case.
Yeah, I think maybe what's difficult for you as well as for us is that we don't have a recipe that says, okay, you get 5 points for study section, you get 2 points for editorial board, and then we tally it up and vote according to range. It's gray, right? So it's your job to convince or to relay this really qualifies national service of sufficient magnitude. That said, for a research individual PI track, study section really counts for a lot. Editorial boards of decent journals count for a lot. Not everybody does that. Can't tell you that if you don't have them, you're not going to get promoted, right?
And then I know that we covered the research aspect, but for individuals on the non-tenure track whose excellence is in clinical service or education, teaching, the same applies. So if you are on national committees, if you are being chosen as a leader in those organizations, this absolutely speaks to your national reputation. And remember, you also have 3 pages within your personal statement to highlight those. So if it is not clear just from your CV, expand upon that and make it very clear what that means and what role that you play in those organizations.
So I just to comment a little bit further on that. So if we move off of the research track and think more about clinical service or teaching, I think one of the difficulties I think that we run into, because this ends up generating a lot of discussion when this sort of thing happens, is the difference between someone doing a really fantastic, let's take teaching for example, where you have someone that comes up for promotion that is doing a really fantastic job locally at teaching. And they may be teaching a lot. They get good student evaluations, and they're doing a lot. They're putting in their time and doing a lot of teaching locally, but that's all they ever do. Even though they're within the teaching excellence, there's no tangible measure of a regional or national reputation. So going from assistant professor to associate professor, you need at least a regional reputation in the area of excellence that you have chosen. So in this case, it's teaching. If you're only teaching locally, even if you're doing a fantastic job, it's really hard to say yes to that because the standards state that you have to have a regional reputation. And so you need to be being asked to go give lectures in other places or teach, talk about teaching, going to national meetings and giving lectures of an educational nature, being involved with education committees for a national society. You need to be doing more than just teaching here locally in order to get the promotion, because the standards say that you have to have your reputation beyond the local environment. That is the standards. don't get mad at us for this. This is the standard. And so we have to look for that. And many people that come up for this, well, not many, some people come up and expect that I've done a fantastic job teaching. I teach a lot and the students love me. I should be promoted. That's not the way the standards are written.
So I am currently an assistant professor looking hopefully at some point for an associate professor promotion. What can I do to maximize these chances, and when do I know that I'm ready to apply? Clinical. Yeah, I'm in the ophthalmology for non-tenure.
What do you need to do?
What do I need to do to kind of maximize the chances of getting promoted to associate professor? And when do I know that I've done enough to actually?
Well, the second part of that question is hard, but the first part of the question is, well, you need, for a non-tenure track, you need to have an area of excellence outside. So you have your cited area of excellence, so clinical service for you, and one of the other two, so research or teaching, you also need to have distinguished yourself, okay? So if it's teaching, then you need to explain to us what teaching contributions you're making, and so you need to be making teaching contributions outside of your clinical service. So, you do rounds this many times with the residents, you are involved with the residency program, you teach this number of medical students, you give this lecture, whatever it is, if teaching is the number two. Or if you're doing research, I'm a team researcher on these things. I work with these phase trials or whatever, and so you need to have a balanced portfolio. You can't just be, again, you can't just be seeing patients and being an awesome doctor and expect to be promoted. You have to have that secondary area of excellence, and it needs to be well documented. And again, the standard of regional reputation applies. So again, if you're just an outstanding physician seeing patients locally and doing a great job, that's not enough. You have to establish yourself regionally at least. So you're being asked to go do things. You can document that you're getting referrals from all over the country for your area of expertise, or whatever it is. You have to show that you have a reach beyond the local environment. You're being asked to go to a society and talk about your area of specialty. You've written book chapters and been invited to do things. You're invited to go speak. These are the things that you need to have in your portfolio to show us that you meet the standard, and the standard is that you have a reputation outside of the immediate area. It's very amorphous because everybody has very different careers, so there's no one answer to this. But the key is that ask yourself, if you were given someone's dossier, how do I objectively decide if this person is well known in their field outside of this campus? And if you thumb through and you can't find anything, you're in trouble. You're probably not going to make it. All right? So you need to have that record. Whatever that record is, it can take many forms, and we see many forms of that. And so that's what you need to be asking yourself. If that helps.
Yeah, I'll jump in also and say, within your field, and again, look towards your mentors, look towards your chair, look towards the members on the DCAP within your department, and find out what those conferences are. A lot of us can't go internationally or nationally, but there are absolutely regional conferences, and a lot of times there may be national or regional conferences that take place in Cleveland. So we're not necessarily looking at where the conference was held, we're looking at who was invited to speak there. And so find out what those opportunities are, get involved with your society, take leadership roles in those things, and really ask for advice from your colleagues and your mentors, because they're the ones that are going to review your packet and then help you understand whether or not you're ready to go up for promotion. So this should not be something that's a one-time conversation. It should absolutely take place multiple times a year, hopefully with a variety of people that say, you know what, I don't have a conference that I am looking towards in the next year. What do you recommend? And especially sponsorship from faculty who say, can you recommend me for a place in leadership with that committee because you're heavily involved with it. So you really need to network to make sure that you're getting those opportunities to contribute on a regional and national level, and that's where faculty within your department can help. Does that?
So the guidelines were on the slide, and now you're asking if you want to come up ahead of the guidelines. Well, you know, it's a risk because it's not on schedule. So, you know, let's take an extreme. You've been here 1 year, and you feel you want to go up for promotion and tenure. You know, what cards do you have in your hand, right? And you know, if you know, good funding is a major part of your portfolio, and you know, you talk to your colleagues and they say, look, there's hardly anybody on campus who would quibble with you, then, you know, go for it. What are some of the things that people trip over? Well, you know, you could, let's just say you got lucky and you got 2 R01s funded, and basically, though, you don't have a whole publication history to also accompany all of that, you know, funding success. There's just, we can't make up, you know, things to put in your publication history. So, you know, it's that sort of, this is where there's a lot of gray, you know, and on the other hand, if in fact you've got the 2 R01s funded this past year, you're in year 1, and you've got 6 cell publications, there's just no discussion, right? It's when you're maybe the team scientist and those 2 R01s come up and you don't know if the fact that there are 10 publications and you're all the middle author on that, but you know, all the data analysis comes to you. Well then, you know, I think from what we've said so far, your annotated bibliography that says, I'm the data analyst. You know, I've written the data protocols, all the data comes to me, all the publications, every one of these publications waited until I finished the data analysis. Okay. You know,
I'll refine it a little bit. So the question is that, you know, personally, I did go and talk to faculty, and I got mixed responses.
Yep.
Some said you have to wait until your 5th year. Some said, you know, even though the guidelines say 3 years, but some suggest 5 years. You know, they're not gonna let you through before 5 years. So the responses, some say, you know, go ahead. The question is, I understand the guidelines, I read them, I understand them, they're very clear, but there are things that seem to be, at least from my impression from faculty, talking to faculty, is that there are things that are not written, that we're not aware of. That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I tried to say earlier. That we don't have a menu, right, to go by. So that's a given in the entire process. But the specific issue of coming up earlier, I'll say 2 things. One is, I would turn it back to you and ask you, why do you want to go up earlier? Because you will be the exception. And we do have the responsibility of being equitable to everybody, right? So if you come up after 2 years, whereas everybody else comes up after 6, you'd better have something really, really heavy there, right? Ask yourself if it's worth it for you. Is it just for the raise? Is it for some other reason? Is it, you know, you are taking, like Pete said, a risk, for sure.
Okay, I would say the short answer is no. There is no hard and fast rule about the number of years between appointment or promotion and the following promotion. Okay, but the standards and the expectations don't shrink with the number of years in between those 2 events, right? And if anything, they might actually go up a little bit, because you're asking us to look at it from the point of view of you're obviously thinking that you're special to some degree, right? That you've outperformed all of your colleagues and that you're coming up early. And that may be true, and that's fantastic, but there needs to be a case made for it. But this is, I would say this is more true for going from assistant professor to associate professor, especially in the tenure track. Going from associate professor to full professor, I mean, you don't have the 3-year review process. I mean, that's a little bit more amorphous from my perspective. But in terms of going from assistant professor to associate professor, and especially with the award of tenure, if you're asking for tenure after 3 years, there better be a really good reason.
Are there questions about teaching, or I just want to get an idea? So teaching, what about clinical service? And then more research? Questions? Okay, so
I was going to ask some kind of a follow-up to that.
okay, and then
And so I wanted to ask sort of you as well about the some people call the kid penalty, where if you take the tenure extension program, but really it doesn't add to the end, it subtracts a year off the beginning of your tenure. So where you may have been a professor for 6 years, now really you're only in your 5th pre-tenure year because you took the tenure extension. But had you known that would be the thing, and you didn't actually take any time off to have a kid, then you would never have done that. So it seems like a penalty.
all right, so we recognize this, and we spoke with the provost office and said, we've had some feedback from our faculty. If you have a child and you report it, there's no review process. Your pre-tenure just gets extended by 1 year. What happens now is if you are in, let's say, your 2nd year, you have a child, so you're kind of repeating that, and that would potentially delay your 3rd year review. You as a faculty member have the option to designate whether or not you want to stick with the original review cycles, or whether or not you want to, again, delay that 1 year and take your new kind of timeline. So
Who do you tell that to?
faculty affairs.
I don't want.
And your chair.
Okay.
So again, this is something that these processes are always evolving, and so we're trying to be responsive. Everything we do hopefully is for the benefit of the faculty member, but if it doesn't fit for you, you need to let us know, and then obviously we'll take it on a case-by-case basis. Sorry, I was going there, and then I'll be right back.
How important are awards and recognitions from med students, residents, et cetera? Teaching is your area of expertise.
It's all important. In your annotated bibliography, tell us why.
I would say it's very important. If teaching is your main area of excellence, then recognition for that is important, and recognition beyond the local environment is even better.
Yeah, I think it brings up another point that may be very intuitive to some and totally counterintuitive to others, which is you have to document things as you go along, right? So when you come up for tenure and you have no teaching evaluations, nothing on record, except maybe you can find the student that likes your course, you are at a disadvantage relative to somebody who documented that they got 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5 over 7 years, right? And that, some people don't like to deal with this, It's not part of our normal, what we think of our normal work days, but if you do it, you are at an advantage, right? So you have to keep being conscious of that. It's the same thing goes for national recognition type things. It's up to you whether you solicit somehow invited talks, for example. It's done very often. You know people in the field, you call them up. Maybe they're interested in what you do. If you don't do that and you realize it only in the last year of the clock, you're at a disadvantage. So there's stuff to be thinking about along the way, I think.
I want to add to that, because one of the things that I did that actually turned out to work really well was I contacted other assistant professors that I knew when I was a postdoc and they were postdocs. I actually contacted them and said, hey, I can arrange a visit for you to come here and give a seminar if you invite me to come there. And I did that like 4 or 5 times. So I had, invited, seminar and speaking engagements all over the country. And, I made that happen. And, and you have to do the same thing for yourselves. And no matter whether it's research, whether it's teaching, you need to be your own best advocate and make these opportunities materialize. You can't just sit around and be a good teacher and then everything will be fine. That's just not the way it works. So be proactive.
Yeah, and I think going to the awards, make sure you know what awards are available to you for medical school teaching, for resident teaching, for within your hospital organization, so that you know you're out for those, and that your students know how to nominate you, or if it's your colleagues. But right.
Can you comment on sort of the older version of collaboration versus team science? So someone at another institution calls you up and if you have expertise that they need and you do it to provide services for them. Is that team science now, or is that collaboration, or how do we deal with that?
So I think one thing that in the old days where you didn't have to annotate your bibliography, you didn't. So again, I think somebody's clearly contacted the person. And it could be because they're best friends, and they know that the discussion's not going to take very long, and you'll have the person you need on board. Okay. On the other hand, somebody calls you and says, I know what your expertise is, and I really need your assay performed on my stuff. Well, that's a pretty easy kind of thing to put in your bibliography. And mark that as a hybrid product of your research. I guess I'm not sure exactly how to advise on when should you do that. If you feel that it might need some explanation as to why you showed up as a middle author with a bunch of people from either all over the country or all from one other institution, I just wouldn't leave it to chance myself anymore.
I don't know. I see it as, the old school collaboration where we're talking about, multiple groups bringing unique things to a particular study. That's team science now. Okay. Whereas, if you get called up and, hey, could you, I see that you use this antibody that you made. Can I have some of your antibody? And then you end up being an author. That's collaboration. That's not really team science because you're not really contributing uniquely to the study in an intellectual sort of way. So that's the way I would draw the distinction. There's no official rules about that, but that's how I would do it.
I think I would distinguish between supplying a tool, whether it's a mouse, like he said, or an antibody, or even you can grow bronchial epithelial cells, right? But you have no idea what I want to measure with them. Can you please grow them for me? It's really you're just supplying a tool, right? And so you should be recognized, and you will be, whether it is a team science, it's sort of iffy, right? So that's, I think if you made a meaningful intellectual contribution to the study, and that's what you should say. It's that simple. Nobody's going to second guess you after all this.
We have no way to prove it anyway. I shouldn't say that.
Or wish.
It's pretty evident,
Yeah.
actually.
So can the committee comment on sort of this team science versus independent researcher, and sort of what is being looked at in terms of funding levels? Because the old days of 2 or 3 R1s are kind of gone, and if you're going to look at sort of the team
feel like I'm monopolizing this a little bit, but okay. So again, there's no rules about this, but for me, if you're claiming to be a team scientist and bringing unique aspects to studies, if you're not the PI of a grant, which oftentimes they're not, then I want to see effort. I want to see the percentage effort. Everybody should be reporting FTEs anyway. Again, make it easy on us to know what the deal is. But for me, you know, if you have 5% effort on a grant, I'm not impressed. If you have 20 or 30% effort on a grant, then that tells me that, you know, your input onto that proposal and that research is valuable and important and critical. And so for me, it's about effort. And, you know, co-PI status is good. Co-investigator status is fine as long as there's a substantial effort involved. You know, if you're 5% on 2 grants, that's not impressive. If you're 20 or 30%, then that tells me something too, right? So I don't know if anyone else. So it's not a dollar amount. It's more, you know, in the context of a team scientist, I look more at the effort side of things than the dollar amount of things. Independent scientists, it's a little bit different. You kind of looking for, you know, are you robustly funding your lab, you know? In which case, I don't really look too much at effort, you know, of the PI, because the effort dwindles as you get more grants, right? So that is a different metric as far as I'm concerned. But if you're a team scientist and you're not the PI of the grant, I want to see substantial effort. That's my point of view. You guys can chime in.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, if there are special circumstances, I think we're more than happy to talk about them after the group discussion. But yeah, the basic advice is agreed.
I think if you feel that there's a question here, right, that the committee will not be totally in favor because there's only 5%, but you think it's meaningful, by all means, justify it and ask the PI to help you. But it's sort of on your shoulder to do that.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing. When you are on team science, when you are doing team science, I think that it's really important to get letters from the PI of the grant in every case. You know, and to say, look, this person is a member of the team and is crucial and provides a unique whatever in this respect. I think that goes a very long way, because again, we don't know. There's no way for us to know, right, what your unique contributions are and the extent to which it fulfills the general expectations of team science. But, you know, if you know, it's unlike with papers, which, I mean, if you have 50 papers, that becomes a problem, you know, to get like letters from every, you know, senior author. But with grants, it's usually a much smaller, finite number. And I think that it's really important to get the leaders of those studies that you're participating in as a team scientist to say so.
Is there a last question? Okay, I have one question around the letters. Oh.
There are numbers of letters for each category. You've been saying get the letters. Can you have more than what they say in a list of letters? You know, whatever the number is there, if you have more than that number, you exceed the max.
So, no. You have 12 external referees, and you should have more in your back pocket for the external referees, because if for some reason they're on a sabbatical, there was a health emergency, they've switched institutions, they don't respond, we will come back to the department and ask both the candidate and the chair to supply us with additional names and contact information and bios. For your students, for the faculty, you have faculty that can talk about your teaching, you get 4, collaborators you get 4, and for service, which is optional, you also get 4. So those are the ones. We haven't solicited, no, we stop at that.
That's kind of tricky for the team scientist
I understand that, and it's a wonderful problem to have more references than or people that you can seek without. But these are actually the provost guidelines. So these are outlined by the provost and what they will accept. And each year they release those, and we actually start our process so early that we're always working with the year previous.
You said that you need a letter or a recommendation about something that is in your bibliography. Is that part of those letters? 'Cause what if you have 20 papers?
That's what we're saying.
Yeah. So yeah, you need to be selective with who you're picking. So again, look at your packet and identify those individuals that you think give the best description and support. Again, you're looking for the best packet, the best evidence, and also who will respond.
Well, and you know, let's also not forget the fact that, you know, we're all human and we're all impressionable, and you know, getting letters from the most prominent universities, from the most prominent individuals with the best CVs should be at the top of the list on making your selection of the 4, right?
And that I would just add to that the question that came up about going up early. You want to think about that. Your CV is going to go out to somebody who does not know you, and he's going to judge you as fairly or as harshly, depending on how you look at it, as we do. And all they have is your CV, right? So I think it's critical, right? The letters mean a lot in the process.
One more comment about the letters. I heard mixed information about whether the collaborators should be from CASE or from, from outside the university, or if it's a disadvantage to have CASE people because you would be biased because they're internal. But just a little bit of feedback about the importance of having people from within or outside the university.
Again, you know, for us, that's your judgment call. If you're gonna go up for a promotion and you want to use that opportunity of a letter to reach out to somebody who could also speak to whether or not you have a national reputation, and you can address 2 issues with 1 letter, the question comes back to you: which one would you choose?
I'd strongly reiterate that, you know, what you're trying to do most of the time, you know, again, this is primarily for, you know, assistant professor to associate professor. One of the key things that you need to do is to establish that you have a national level reputation, at least for research, regional for the other areas of excellence. And how do you do that? Well, if you've got colleagues or collaborators that you're working with all over the country, and you can get letters from them that fulfill both of those things, that's really good, right? You know, most of us, I would hope, can, you know, get our colleague next to us to write a cool letter because, you know, we're friends, and, you know, right? It speaks more, to me, it speaks more that you're collaborating outside of the university and you're getting letters from those individuals. That's not to say that you're penalized, but it just looks more impressive. I mean, take yourself away from your own dossier and think about getting someone else's, right? If you have a bunch of colleague letters from your own department in one case, and another one where you've got a collaborator at Penn and Stanford and, I don't know, UT Southwest, that looks stronger because, again, we're looking for that reputation. We're looking for that regional or national presence. That speaks to that.
All right. So thank you very much to our panelists and for everyone with your questions. If you do have questions, please stay after. And for those watching, if you have questions, please email and we will be responsive.